Hi, I'm Daniel Likis, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's the author of the book Junkworld, the Ballad of Leroy Brown, no other than Mr. MK Stangeland Jr.
Hello.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Michael, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Well, yes, I am. Yes, well, primarily I'm here because of this book that I wrote, Junkworld, Ballad of Leroy Brown. It's the first novel that I've gotten published. I got it published through a hybrid process. I certainly hope it's not the last because writing is very much a passion of mine, storytelling, a passion of mine. I live in the Midwest, love living in the Midwest. Currently, I also live with my grandma as kind of an in-home caretaker sort of thing, which in some ways is actually kind of important to the process of getting this published. I currently have a day job in retail, which is one of those things that beats being a starving artist. For this book in particular, related, I'm one of the things I'm a fan of, which directly played into this book, is if you're familiar with robot combat, where people will build robots, put them in an arena, and hey, can my machine beat up your machine? Oh, is the internet connected properly?
Yes, indeed. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm getting a message, which is unusual for me.
Go ahead, Mr. Michael. I just make your front page of your book. Hello?
Okay, trying to reconnect.
I think Mr. Leroy or Mr.
Shoot,
Michael, sorry.
shoot.
Mr. Michael is disconnected, so while we're waiting for him, I just want to plug in my other podcast, Book 101, other podcast, Food 101, in its fifth season with Chef Alessandro, one of specialty chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Again, let's do connect
Oh,
with
so
Mr. No worries.
I am so terribly sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah.
While you're away, I'm promoting my other podcast.
No, I
So,
fully understand. You got to find some way to find the time while I'm trying to deal with my difficulties.
yes, so Mr. Michael, thank you so much for sharing your novel to the world. So, Junkworld, the Ballad of Leroy Brown, can you tell us about it?
So yes, there are two levels. First, you've got the main plot, which is, it's a science fiction book set at an undetermined point in the future, where you have this military warbot turned arena fighter. So after this robot, Leroy Brown, wins a particularly important fight, he winds up, after being shut down for maintenance, being reactivated on Junkworld, which is a planet that's just one giant junkyard. It's, people send their machines there when they want to get rid of them. Now, having just won an important fight, he's certain that he's there by mistake, so he makes it his mission to find a way to go back to where he thinks he's supposed to be. And in the middle of all this, he also gets wrapped up in a situation involving a robot that's just trying to conquer the whole planet. And then there's also the underlying sort of thematic part of it. And thematically, the story is kind of about how do you respond to the challenges that life throws at you, in a sense of, like, you think your life is going fine, here's how my life is going, I've got everything the way I want it to be, but then life comes around and basically upends everything. It kind of flips the table on you, and then you got to decide, okay, how are you going to react to that? So
what circumstances lead champion fighting robot Leroy Brown to find himself on a junk world, a planet for discarded machines?
yes.
So, what the cause? Why Leroy Robert or Leroy Brown discarded?
Well, that is definitely explored in the book. Um, there, yeah, it's one of those things that I don't want to say too much because I mean,
Spoilers.
yeah, it is sort of a spoiler thing, and I mean, it is explained, but it's one of those things that it's. I mean, Ed, there is a certain level where I'm hoping that if a book is really good, you can enjoy it even if you know exactly what's going to happen. At the same time, this isn't a book that's been out there that's into the masses where anyone who is aware of the book is probably going to know what those twists are. So it's one of those things where I don't want to go too much into detail about, okay, here's why he's on the planet, because that's one of those things for the reader to discover.
So, Mr. Michael, what are your struggles in writing Junk World?
Well, I'd say the biggest struggle I'm having right now is getting people informed about it. I mean, where I feel very good about this book, and the response from the few people who have read it has been very positive. It's just a matter of connecting with the right audience. Now, well, I guess there's also the matter of during the actual writing process, and during the actual writing process, there's the matter of, now for anyone who's doing who's writing anything, it's very rare circumstance where you're actually going to have put it all out in a single draft, this one single draft as it is initially written. Yeah, that's all good. There are going to be rewrites. So the challenge then is finding out, when you're rewriting, what stuff do you have that is good, and what stuff do you have that genuinely needs to be changed? Because there's the saying of, well, you need to kill your darlings and all that, but there is very much a matter of, am I changing something for the sake of changing, or does this story element really need, or is this story element good as it is? And I think with the actual writing process, during the process of creating it, that right there is the biggest challenge of knowing, okay, which parts of the book are solid and which part of the books actually need to be changed.
So, in what ways does Leroy's mission intertwine with the fight against the top dog?
Well, that is, I promise this, I don't want this to be like this is my explanation or everything, but the reason that the top dog, the main villain of the story, is interested in Leroy Brown is also an important twist that comes up later in the story. It is something that I, then when you're reading, I think there are, as you go through up to it, I try and leave the hints there, and I tried to make it very clear that yes, I am going somewhere this, and I've actually laid it out, but the actual, again, this is I mean, why the actual relationship connection between Leroy Brown and the top dog, and why the top dog is specifically interested in Leroy, is another spoiler that I don't want to give away too much. But the connection between them very much plays into, and could very well be a key piece of where I mentioned the underlying theme of the book of, here's of how do you respond to life's circumstances, because where Leroy Brown and where the top dog are, both are related to what choices each of them made based on what happened to them in life. And in some ways, there is very much, you can see a contrast of how they respond to the challenges they have had to deal with.
Very well said, Mr. Michael. Very well said. So, how did you depict the society and environment of a junk world?
Could you repeat the question? Unfortunately, I don't think I quite understood it.
How did you depict the
Oh,
society and environment of a junk world?
well, a lot of it I think comes down to, well, with a planet like this where the thing about Junkworld is, one of the things I established early on is that by and large this is a dead planet in a way, where it's established quite clearly, no living biological stuff lives here. And once you get past the first chapter and get into Junkworld, every character in the book is a robot. And one of the things that came from that is, I'm looking for ways to really, one of the things I really made use of in that is finding fun ways to develop machines that I thought would be interesting in this, especially when I'm coming from a place of, well, the robots here are all, they're all kind of in Leroy's same situation, not necessarily, not the same background necessarily, but all the robots that are there had some other purpose before they were effectively thrown out, and now they're kind of trying to develop a new life for themselves in a sense. So there's very much that sense of, how can I create these machines that, making the most of the setting, and how can I make it, well, for example, one character in the book that it's not a major character, but it does have a significant part, is you have this robot. What was this robot like in a prior life, and how is the robot different here? And it's explained that this robot, prior to being sent to Junkworld, was actually an animatronic. The thing is, on a planet like Junkworld, well, there's not really much need for animatronics. So you got to look at, okay, so now this robot had to find something else to do other than be an animatronic, because, if you're going to keep going on, well, you got to find something to do with your time, because otherwise you're just going to be sitting around and doing nothing. And there's another element is, and this is one of those things that's where a lot of time you can have fun doing things with sci-fi that if you applied it to the real world, it might not make sense, but you can make it fit. For example, a major method of transportation that he used are basically these giant ship-like vehicles that travel around on wheels or treads. Like, realistically, that's not something that people would probably do for any good reason, but I can have fun with it here. I can make it a part of the world, and it's a matter of, make it a way that it'll come off as compelling and spark the reader's imagination as they're trying to envision the scene.
So, Mr. Michael, how does the concept of being discarded or obsolete manifest in the characters' experiences?
Well, I think it goes back to that core theme of, how do you respond to, the challenges that life throws at you. And part of that is there's a repeated message with these other characters that Leroy interacts with, where they try and tell him, look, you're thrown out, you got a life, you gotta admit that you're not wanted anymore. And it comes up against Leroy insistent that, no, the last time, before I was reactivated on Junkworld, I just had this major victory. I was in this great place. It has to have been a mistake that I'm here. And so it very much goes back to that core theme of how do you respond to how do you respond to what happens to you in life? It's some robots, they give up, and being the way it is, the robots that give up, that are destroyed, well, their parts are probably going to be used for something else, because they may be junk, but as long as it still can be made to do something. Well, if you have a broken robot, you can probably take that broken, destroyed robot's arm and use it to replace your own arm if you've lost it. So there's very much it's a certain element of, do you accept your situation as it is? Do you deny it? Do you there's I don't want to come off as like I'm just repeating and coming off as a broken record, but there is, it comes back to that point of,
So, Mr. Michael, what will be the big difference of Junkworld to the movie Wall-E?
Well, for one thing, this planet is very explicitly said to be its own thing. Like, I establish very early on that no, the twist. I mean, yeah, there's a twist here, but the twist is not, oh, this is some planet in the future. Turns out this was the planet he wanted to be all along. This is very much a planet in its own corner of the galaxy. It's a planet that people send things to. Earth doesn't appear in the book, but there is like a single mention. Hey, are you aware of Earth, in order to explain a character's history? And it's actually amusing that you do mention the movie Wall-E, because I don't want to say too much, but there is actually a character in the book that is inspired by the character Wall-E himself, very much in a way that it's a wink wink, nudge nudge, not this is Wall-E put in here. But I just thought I'd want to mention that because I thought it was amusing since you did mention that. It's even more amusing is that the character is that with that character, when my mom read the book, she actually latched onto that character as her favorite. So
Good job.
Yeah, it is.
Good
It is.
job.
Yeah, it is one of those small entertaining, amusing things when you have people that you do know read it and you learn, okay, this is what elements do the people latch onto when they read, coming to it from a different perspective from someone who has read it multiple times. It's because a weird, strange thing that I found since I actually got the book published is, I'm writing this book, working on this book for so long, doing so many drafts that I don't know if it says something bad about me, but I actually, ever since I got the book published in its final form, I actually haven't taken the time to just read through it as a hard copy. And it's one of those things I feel I should do. It's just I haven't.
So, Mr. Michael, how does the narrative address the idea of self-worth among machines deemed as a junk?
That is a good that is a good question. I think I feel like I'm coming back to that broken record thing. We're trying to come to, that main theme, but I think a part of it comes down to, okay, if you've decided to accept your life here, and it's a matter of, okay, what role have I found in this new society? What life have I managed to make for myself on this planet where I've been sent to, because I no longer have value. Excuse me. I no longer have value to the people who threw me out. There's a character I mean, yeah, there's certain characters that it applies to more firmly than other. There's one character called Mr. Destructo who plays into it big, and there's very much an element of he's got a very, I mean, in the grand scheme of the planet, and combined with his own history, well, he has both a small role in the grand scheme of the planet, but he has a big role in that small location, and he is very much he is making the most of it. It also applies to the main villain, where I mean, a lot of the villain's drive comes from trying to establish that value, and kind of trying to make up for things that he feels he's been denied because he was sent to Junkworld.
So, Mr. Michael, how did you build tension leading up to the climax of the story?
Yeah, I feel bad because I'm having a hard time thinking of how to answer that. Um, I mean, one. Okay, this may not be a direct answer, but possibly the best I have is that, um, in some ways, it's possibly a natural element from writing the story, because one of the comparisons I've made for myself when I'm looking at my writing process is that in some ways, crafting the story, writing the story is, in a sense, like maybe sculpting a statue from stone, where you can very much have an idea of what you want the final product to be, but at the same time you can't shape it in any way you want. There's sort of a plot, and there's a book in there, and you're chipping away. Eventually the product does have rules of what it wants to be, that you like, for example, if you're trying to craft a statue of a human being, there's certain things it's going to have to be. You have to have, two arms, two legs, that kind of thing. Now, you can make that statue pose the way you want, but there are certain ways you can't, there are certain places you can't cut. There's certain places that the stone has to be if you want it to actually resemble a human being. Like if you have it too tall, have the arms too far down, well, it's no longer going to resemble a human. And so, in the same way, if I'm trying to make this story work, the tension kind of builds itself, and it's just a matter of fitting in right and finding out the proper way to depict it to fit into what the story wants to be based on the plot I am trying to create.
Mr. Michael, what would be your advice for those people out there who want to write their novel?
Well, it may be cliche, but obviously one of the biggest things is, well, you just need to actually write. I I mean, I guess I have a hard time imagining from a personal perspective, but I understand it, is that sometimes people, they want something to happen, but then they don't take any steps to actually make it happen. So, like one of the pieces of advice I learned once is, since you have to write the book multiple times anyway with multiple drafts, the first draft is a focus on just get something put together. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to, I mean, it can be an absolute mess. But if you have a first draft, you have something completed that you can actually work with. So if you want to actually write, just focus on putting out that first draft. I mean, it could very well be terrible, but the worst case, you will have something put out that you can work with. I mean, there's the saying of how many hours, how much do you have to work at something to actually get good at it. So if you put something, if you even just get out that first draft, well, you have a point of reference you can work from. You can look at all this stuff and like, okay, I put together this first draft. Here's all the stuff that is terrible. Here's the good things that I put together. I can work with this good stuff. Here's maybe the good stuff about the junk that I can take and rework. So I think the best advice is to just focus on getting that first draft done. Don't worry about how good it is, because unless you are a very exceptional talent and probably someone who doesn't need that advice, well, you're going to have to rewrite your book once, twice, three. You're going to have to rewrite anyway, so you might as well just focus on getting a first draft that you can use as a launch pad.
So thank you for your advice, Mr. Michael. And stop procrastinating, people. If you have the passion to write, and share to the world like Mr. MK. So, what your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
Well, my immediate short term is I'm currently working on the next book I'm planning to publish. I don't want to say too much about it now. I will say that it is kind of a major turn, because in contrast to this science fiction book that's primarily for older readers. I mean, there's some ground there for a little on the younger side. I mean, not too young, but in contrast, the one I'm working on is more of a children's fairy tales type story. So that is the immediate thing I'm working on. But long term, I'd just like to keep writing and establish, keep writing, and ideally make writing something that I can actually live off of. Primarily because if I'm living off of what I'm writing, then I can put more time into actually writing versus, I've got this day job that, like I said, I don't know if it got cut up. It beats being a starving artist. Well, if I'm actually getting paid for my writing, I can focus on the writing. I can get more material out. And and not even just novels. I've also dabbled in screenplay stuff, and it's just my long-term goal. I'd love to establish myself as a professional storyteller in a sense.
Good luck to your goals, Mr.
Yes.
MK. So, what message about resilience and adaptability can be inferred from Leroy's experiences?
Could you repeat the question, please?
What messages about resilience and adaptability can be inferred from Leroy's experiences?
Well, I don't remember the exact wording, but there's very much a in like as the book gets into the climax, there's a conversation which I think kind of touches on this point, and it's a matter of a better point might be like a quote I latch on to is that, look, wherever your life may be right now, as long as you're still alive, there is always hope that things can get better. So I think there's a sense of, resilience and just pushing forward and looking to, okay, how do I get past where I am right now, and thinking about, where can things be if I just find a way to stick it out. There's, if, if you are alive, there is still opportunity to do something with your circumstances. There is opportunity to improve things, and things can get better. So,
Very well said, Mr. Michael. Very well said. And
yeah, the way things get better may not be how you expect or imagine them, but yeah.
But before we wrap up our discussion for tonight, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, and each fifth season with my specialty co-host. He's working in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto, Chef Alessandro Panattoni. So please do watch us live every Sunday. We talk about our letter senders all over the world asking about, well, food, people. So, Mr. Michael, to wrap up our discussion, how does the conclusion of the novel resolve the central conflicts and what the future implications are suggested for Junkworld and its inhabitants?
Well, Leroy does ultimately, I guess without trying to give away too much, he does find where he's supposed to be and he figures out his life. And there is, the story does end on a note where there's grounds to imagine where things are going to go forward. I can't say with any certainty that I would necessarily write a sequel, because I feel very much like this is a book that tells the story. I didn't write it with the idea of, well, I want to launch a franchise off this. I'm not actively looking to spread this out and mint as much as I can. Look, if the book did sell enough and there were interest and I thought of a good follow-up story, I could write more. But I think there is something to be said for, if you're someone who is looking for just a self-contained story that isn't actively looking to sell you on wanting more of it, well, this is a good book to get into, because you will find a self-contained story, beginning, middle, of end. It leaves it open, but in a way more, look, there's a life beyond this unit. There's a life for these characters beyond the end of this book. I think I forgot if there was some other part of the question I was supposed to answer or not.
Mr. Michael.
Sorry.
Well said. Thank you so much for sharing your talent to the world. And can you please invite our listeners to support Junkworld?
Yes. Like I said, like I said, sorry, I think I got lost there. But yeah, I'm certain the main problem, as I said at the beginning, has been finding an audience, but I do feel confident that if I can connect with the right people, I've got something really good here. It's a weird circumstance where if you look on Amazon right now, there's like only 3 reviews, but all 3 of those reviews are 5 stars. So I've gotten positive feedback from the people who have read it. So I do feel confident that if people give this a chance, this will be something they very much enjoy. It's just a matter of, find the people who are willing to give it a chance. I do very much understand, the larger world, can make it difficult for people to spend money on uncertain things. I can understand that. I am hopeful that, with the way things are trending right now, that might create more opportunity for people to try out new things, especially when a lot of the established cultural and entertainment elements maybe aren't in a good space. So, I'm just...
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Michael, because if you support him, more novels to come.
Yes,
and
I have. Yes, I have. Look, this book. There's no guarantee I'll write anymore, but I have like a buttload of story concepts and ideas to work with. I may have more ideas for stories than I will ever have an opportunity to write. I'm regularly coming up with new ideas that I put in a folder. Hey, hopefully I can get to this sometime, as well as a handful of books that I have written but are just not quite published yet. But that's another story.
Yes, people, again, I said let's support Mr. Michael, because if you support him, more books to come. And please do listen to my feature author of the month of Of course, January, Mr. Harry Turtle Dove, and my feature author of the month of this coming February, the same. She is award-winning and best-selling author, Miss Ravenhouse. So, Mr. Michael, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me on, and you have a good evening.
Modicon people, see you soon.